You are not designed to be ruled by feelings. You were built to be led by focus, by fire, by discipline. Yet in this generation, the dopamine system, one of the most powerful engines in your brain, has been hijacked. Trained to chase, dopamine was never meant to reward you for simply arriving. It was designed to ignite the fire in your system during the climb, during the chase, during the disciplined pursuit of what matters. Every time you move toward a meaningful goal, even if it's far away, your brain releases dopamine not as a celebration of success, but as a divine encouragement to keep going. And this is where most people go wrong. They think the reward is supposed to come when it's finished. But the biology speaks a different truth. It rewards the pursuit, not the prize. The brain doesn't wait to celebrate. It responds the moment you step into action. That means the key to long-term motivation isn't success. It's movement, it's engaging the system by showing up day after day, especially when it's hard, especially when it's boring, especially when the world says you should quit. And when you do that, when you choose discipline over distraction, you begin to rewire the very chemistry of your motivation. You train your brain to crave effort. You reshape your reward system to align with growth, not gratification. You are no longer a slave to fleeting highs. You are a steward of long-term purpose, and this isn't just biology, this is sacred architecture. Built into the human nervous system is the fingerprint of a creator who designed us to find joy in process, not just in results. The pain of effort, the sweat of training, the mental friction of choosing what is right over what is easy. These are not accidents. They are holy thresholds, gateways to transformation. Every time you embrace the grind, every time you wake up early, push through resistance, focus when you want to drift, you are not just doing the work. You are programming your spirit to overcome. You are aligning with the deeper law written into the universe, that blessing follows obedience and reward follows discipline. But if you chase dopamine through shortcuts, through comfort, through entertainment, through ease, you fracture your system. You teach your brain to crave without creation, to want without work, and the cost of that is heavy. Because over time, the dopamine runs dry, the pleasure fades, and what's left is weakness, restlessness, a hunger that can't be satisfied. But when you tie dopamine to discipline, when your system learns that the true high is in the process itself, you become unstoppable. You no longer need to win in order to feel like a winner. You feel like a winner because you are in motion, and motion is what the brain rewards most. The brain doesn't reward passivity. It doesn't reward the fantasy of greatness. It rewards movement in the direction of it. That means every time you act in discipline, every time you push, repeat, delay, endure, you are triggering the very chemistry that builds greatness. Not after the goal, but during the grind. And once you understand that, you'll never sit around waiting for motivation again. You'll create it biologically, spiritually, relentlessly, one act of discipline at a time every time you choose short-term pleasure over long-term purpose. You make a trade. A silent one, a costly one. You trade the strength of your dopamine system for a fleeting high. You trade resilience for comfort. You trade the wiring of a warrior for the sensitivity of a slave. Because dopamine is not infinite. It is not free. Every time you flood your brain with easy rewards, scrolling, snacking, distractions, pornography, validation, you train it to expect dopamine without effort. And when you teach your system that reward comes without pursuit, you destroy the very structure designed to carry you toward greatness. There is a law written into the biology of your brain. What gets rewarded gets repeated. And when you constantly feed your mind with low-effort rewards, it begins to rewire itself around those patterns. It becomes lazy, it becomes dull, it starts to resist the real path. The hard path, it says, why endure? Why delay? Why strive when comfort is always within reach? And so your drive withers, your passion fades. Your ambition dies not with a crash, but with a slow, quiet surrender, But when you delay gratification, something holy happens, something chemical, something spiritual. When you resist the urge for the cheap reward and choose discipline instead, your dopamine system begins to recalibrate. The receptors become more sensitive. The brain learns to release dopamine not for consumption, but for commitment. It begins to associate joy with effort. It starts to reward the process, not the shortcut. And in that shift, you become powerful because your motivation is no longer tied to what feels good. It is tied to what builds you. This is why fasting exists. Why solitude exists. Why ancient warriors and prophets understood the power of abstaining. They weren't punishing themselves. They were cleansing their systems. They were sharpening their minds. They were rewiring their reward circuits so that their joy would come not from indulgence, but from obedience. That's what delayed gratification really is. It's worship. It's sacrifice. It's telling your mind and body, I will not be ruled by cravings. I will be led by calling. The world is saturated with dopamine traps, artificial highs that feel good in the moment, but leave your system depleted. But you don't have to live like that. You can rebuild. You can reset. You can fast from the noise, the digital sugar, the constant stimulation. And in that fast, in that discipline, your system begins to heal. The receptors begin to open. The baseline begins to rise. And suddenly, things that once felt hard focus, work, training, prayer become not only possible, but pleasurable. Because the highest form of dopamine is not the one that comes after consumption. It is the one that flows through effort, through restraint, through mastery. That's where power is found. That's where identity is forged. And the moment you stop seeking the quick high and start honoring the slow burn, you begin to win. Internally, neurochemically, eternally, there is a part of your brain, small in size but massive in power, that stands between you and chaos. It's the prefrontal cortex, the command center of discipline, decision, making, and self-control. It is what allows you to say no when everything in you craves yes. It is the region that lets you hold the line when the flesh is weak, when temptation surrounds you, when quitting whispers your name. And this part of the brain is not fixed. It can grow, it can be strengthened, but not through comfort, only through resistance. Every time you delay gratification, every time you resist the easy road, every time you say, not now. I'm choosing higher, you activate this region. You fire neurons that tell your system, we are not ruled by instinct, we are governed by intention. And the more you repeat that signal, the stronger those circuits become. This is the essence of neuroplasticity. The brain literally reshapes itself according to what you practice. And when you practice self-control, when you walk the narrow path, your prefrontal cortex expands its influence. You begin to override impulse. You begin to lead from a higher command. But when you give in over and over to indulgence, distraction, and emotional reaction, that region weakens. It loses power and another part of your brain takes over, the limbic system, the seat of craving, the engine of survival. The part that wants what it wants now, regardless of consequence. And this is why so many feel lost, undisciplined, addicted. Not because they are broken, but because they have trained their brain to obey the impulse, not the intention. They've repeated surrender, and now their system expects it. But discipline is the antidote, not as a vague concept, but as a neurological weapon. When you engage in difficult action, when you stay focused in distraction, when you pray instead of panic, train instead of scroll, speak life instead of reacting in anger, you are not just becoming better, you are literally rewiring your brain to handle resistance with strength and clarity. You are fortifying the structure that holds your highest self. There is something deeply spiritual about this, because in a world ruled by chaos, the mind ruled by discipline is sacred. It becomes a vessel not just for success, but for divine order, a place where your choices align with your calling, a space where emotion bows to purpose, where desire bows to design. That is what the prefrontal cortex was created to do, not to kill passion, but to guide it. Not to suppress fire, but to direct it. Every rep of resistance is a rep for your brain. Every time you hold the line, you lay another brick in the fortress of your mind. The greatest victories are not visible to others. They happen in the moment you choose to stay steady, when everything in you screams to collapse. In that moment, you're not just winning, you're evolving. You are stepping into the mind of a conqueror. One act of discipline at a time. Every action you repeat is not just something you do. It's something you become, because your brain is not a fixed structure. It's a living, breathing organism. It molds itself around consistency. It responds to what you do most, not what you wish for, not what you dream about, but what you practice. And every time you show up in discipline, even when you don't feel like it, even when it's inconvenient, you're etching new neural pathways into the fabric of your identity. You are literally carving the shape of who you are becoming. Neurons that fire together wire together. That's not just a phrase, it's a law. When you wake up early and train your body, when you sit down and focus on your task without distraction, when you speak truth instead of excuse, when you pray instead of panic, you're not just being good. You are strengthening biological circuits, pathways of self-control, of courage, of endurance, that become easier to access every time you walk them. And the more you walk them, the more they define you. Your brain does not care whether you're building strength or weakness. It simply obeys repetition. That's what makes discipline sacred. It means that even in your most unseen moments, heaven is watching, and your brain is recording. You are becoming, you are transforming, and that transformation is not happening at the surface. It's happening deep inside the nervous system where identity is wired. You are not faking discipline, you are forging it. The most dangerous lie this generation believes is that your identity is how you feel. But identity is not emotion, it's execution. You become what you do with consistency, and if you wait to feel inspired before you act, you are handing over the keys of your brain to your feelings. But when you act in faith, when you repeat what is hard with holy intention, you're telling your system, "This is who I am now." The brain listens, it adapts, it reinforces the new reality, and this isn't just mental training, it's spiritual warfare. Because every time you break a cycle of laziness, every time you override the urge to give in, every time you choose the narrow path when the wide one is screaming for you, you're not just winning in a moment, you're shifting your identity, you're resurrecting the disciplined version of you that was always there, buried under layers of doubt and distraction. There are no shortcuts to becoming someone new. There is only repetition. The world may not see the early mornings, the quiet decisions, the silent battles, but heaven does. And more than that, your brain does. It marks every choice. It builds around every act of discipline. And slowly, powerfully, it begins to lock in the identity of a person who doesn't quit. A person who doesn't need to be told what to do. A person who doesn't wait for motivation to act. Because the action is the identity now. Not because you felt like it. Because you trained it, one faithful, repeated step at a time. The human brain was never designed to be flooded with stimulation every second of the day. Dopamine, the chemical that drives pursuit, ambition, and focus, was meant to be sacred, released in moments of real effort, real connection, real meaning. But we've turned it into a drug, a cheap thrill, a tap, a swipe, a scroll, and another hit of artificial reward floods the system. And what was once powerful has become poisoned. The receptors dull, the hunger fades, the drive dies. Not because it was never there, but because it's been drowned in noise. Dopamine was meant to reward becoming, not just consuming. And when you constantly give your system fast pleasure, whether it's endless content, processed food, digital approval, you train your brain to expect dopamine without action. You train it to settle for imitation instead of transformation. And over time, your threshold rises. What once satisfied now feels empty. You can't focus, you can't push, you can't sustain effort, not because you're lazy, But because your brain is burned out on pleasure, but here is the hope: the system can be reset, the sensitivity can be restored. You don't need more stimulation, you need fasting, you need stillness, you need silence, because when you stop feeding the system with constant reward, it begins to heal. It begins to crave meaning again. And that's the beauty of the design. When you remove the artificial, the real starts to shine. Your brain remembers, your biology remembers, the hunger for purpose was never gone. It was just buried beneath dopamine addiction. This is why fasting is not just a physical act, it is a neurological reset. It is a spiritual rebellion against the culture of constant comfort. When you fast from stimulation, when you unplug from the flood, you make room for real clarity, for real desire. For real discipline, you give your dopamine system a chance to return to its original purpose, to drive you toward the person you were born to become. It may feel like death at first, the quiet, the emptiness, the itch to distract, but that is not weakness. That is withdrawal. It is the nervous system letting go of a lie. And if you stay in that silence long enough, something begins to rise. Focus, clarity, hunger, the kind that doesn't depend on likes, on sugar, on noise, but on calling, the kind that wakes you up in the morning not because you have to, but because you burn to. Every day you fast from cheap stimulation, you reclaim your fire. Every moment you choose silence over noise, solitude over scrolling, intention over impulse, you awaken the ancient system that was designed for greatness. This isn't deprivation, this is purification, the sharpening of a mind, the cleansing of a soul, the reactivation of a warrior's chemistry. You don't need more dopamine, you need less noise. You need to let the receptors breathe again, to let them feel what real purpose tastes like. And when they do, motivation no longer becomes something you chase. It becomes something you carry. The world has lied to you. It told you reward comes easy, that fulfillment is found in comfort, that success can be shortcut, and that the feeling of greatness should come without the fire of process. But your biology tells a different story. Your nervous system, your brain chemistry, your soul. They were designed to connect reward with effort. Real reward, lasting satisfaction, deep soul-level drive. It doesn't show up when life is easy. It arrives when you rise through resistance. Every time you choose the hard path, when you lean into discomfort with clarity of purpose, the brain takes note. Circuits begin to align. Dopamine, the chemical currency of motivation, is released not because you've won, but because you're willing to fight. Your system was never built to celebrate passivity. It rewards pursuit, and the greater the challenge, the greater the neurochemical reward, if the effort is tethered to intention. That's the key, not random struggle, not aimless hustle, but meaningful effort. Intention is what transforms pain into progress. When you know why you're enduring, when the challenge is aligned with your calling, your entire neurobiological state shifts. Your mind no longer sees resistance as threat. It sees it as a signal that says, this is worth it. And the reward is not just dopamine, it's confidence, it's clarity, it's power that cannot be taken from you because you earned it in the dark. Most people seek reward without responsibility, pleasure without pressure, but that only leads to spiritual exhaustion and neurological burnout. Because when you separate reward from effort, you cheapen the process. You dilute the brain's motivation circuitry. You train yourself to expect greatness without the grind, but the system doesn't respond to shortcuts, it responds to sacred struggle. That's how the human engine was built, to burn through resistance with purpose and emerge sharper, clearer, stronger. This is why sacred texts speak of trials refining the soul like gold in fire. It's not poetic, it's neurobiological. Effort connected to mission transforms both the mind and the spirit. It doesn't just build capacity, it reveals character. The man or woman who chooses to labor through silence, through uncertainty, through long hours of disciplined repetition, that person is being rewired at the deepest level. They no longer chase reward, they become the source of it. This is the path of sustainable drive, not based on hype, not driven by emotion, but anchored in a system that was designed by divine intelligence. A system where effort doesn't just lead to reward, it is the reward, and the longer you endure it, the deeper it flows. You begin to feel a fire that doesn't fade when applause stops, a hunger that doesn't vanish when things get quiet. Because the drive was never external, it was forged in discipline, baptized in challenge, and crowned in the kind of reward no one can hand you. You must become it through sweat, through struggle, through intentional, holy effort.